I spent 15 years telling anyone who would listen that my son, my Michael, was a Harvard star, living high up in some gleaming Manhattan penthouse. That pride, it became my whole world after my husband Tom passed. But that day, the day I was cleaning out his old childhood room, getting the house ready to sell, I found a box tucked away, hidden deep in the back of his closet. A simple cardboard box that shattered everything I thought I knew. Have you ever wondered what hurts more? Finally discovering the truth? Or realizing just how long, how completely, you believed in a lie? It is a question I wrestle with even now. If you are listening to this story, thank you so much for being here. Let us know where you are joining us from in the world, and do not forget to subscribe to become part of our growing community. My name is Patricia Sullivan, Pat to my friends, and I am 64 years old. For 35 years, I taught third grade right here in our little New Jersey town. Now I am retired, living alone in the house where Michael grew up, the house filled with echoes of my late husband, Tom. Tom, he was a good man, a driven man, but he had expectations, big ones, especially for Michael. He always envisioned our son becoming some kind of titan, a real success story you read about in the papers. After Tom died 10 years ago, suddenly, from a heart attack that felt like it ripped the floor out from under me, Michael's success became, well, it became everything. It was the one bright star in my shrinking sky. Michael, my Michael. Harvard Business School graduate, he told me, a sharp analyst at some prestigious investment fund downtown. He lived, supposedly, in one of those Manhattan apartments with views that cost more than my entire house. I pictured him up there, looking out over the city lights, making deals, living the life his father always wanted for him, and I was so proud, bursting with it. Every Christmas card, every conversation with old colleagues or neighbors at the grocery store, somehow it always circled back to Michael's achievements. Oh, Pat's son, the Wall Street whiz kid, they would say, and I would just beam. This house, though, it holds too many ghosts now. Tom's empty armchair still sits in the den. Michael's room upstairs remained mostly untouched, since he supposedly left for college. First the prestigious undergraduate program, then Harvard. Old baseball trophies gathered dust on the shelves next to a framed photo, a picture Michael sent me years ago, supposedly of him smiling in front of a Harvard building. It looked so official. There were pennants, old textbooks I never quite understood the titles of, the lingering scent of teenage boy, somehow trapped in the wood floor despite years of airing out. Selling it feels like cutting off a limb, but it is too big for just me. The upkeep, the memories. It is time for something smaller, an apartment closer to, well, closer to where I thought Michael was. That was the plan anyway. Move into a nice little 2-bedroom, maybe closer to the city, so I could finally see this famous penthouse he was always too busy to show me. He called often, bless his heart, always checking in. "Hi, Mom, just wrapping up a big deal." Or, "Sorry I sound rushed, Mom, the market's crazy today." The stories were always impressive, full of financial jargon I did not understand but nodded along to anyway. Talk of hedge funds, portfolios, bullish markets. Sometimes we would video chat. He would be in what looked like a sleek office, minimalist furniture, a view of blurry skyscrapers behind him. Always impeccably dressed in a crisp shirt, sometimes a tie, loosened just so. "Working late again, Mom," he would sigh, running a hand through his hair just like his father used to. He looked the part, every inch the successful executive. But invitations to visit? They were always deflected. "Things are just slammed right now, Mom. The apartment's a mess. Let me get it properly set up for you first." Maybe next month. Next month never seemed to come. There was always a deal closing, a business trip, a market fluctuation that required his undivided attention. Deep down, a tiny seed of unease might have tried to sprout, but I pushed it down. It was easier to believe. It felt better to believe. My Michael, my successful son. Tom would have been so proud. And the money. Oh, the money. It started small a few years after Tom passed. Michael called, sounding excited. He had an inside track, a special investment opportunity just for family. Something about leveraging his position, getting preferred rates. My retirement fund was modest, mostly Tom's life insurance and my teacher's pension. It wasn't much, but Michael promised he could make it grow, really make it work for me. "Let me handle it, Mom," he had said, his voice full of confidence. "This is what I do. It will be much safer, better returns than just sitting in some low-yield account." So, every month I sent him a check. Not a huge amount at first, but it added up. I dipped into my savings, telling myself it was an investment in my future, guided by my brilliant son. He would send me occasional emails, vague updates about positive trends and portfolio growth. It all sounded so professional. Over the years, it must have been 60, maybe closer to $70,000. Nearly everything I had managed to save, my safety net. Then came the day I decided to finally tackle Michael's old room. Armed with boxes and trash bags, I started on the closet. Old sneakers, forgotten board games, a truly hideous sweater I think his Aunt Carol knitted him. One Christmas. I reached deep into the back, behind a stack of old yearbooks, and my fingers brushed against cardboard. I pulled it out. Just a plain brown box, taped shut, surprisingly heavy. No label. Curiosity piqued. I sat on his dusty childhood bed and carefully slit the tape with my house key. Inside, it wasn't old baseball cards or forgotten treasures. It was papers. Official-looking documents. My heart started a slow, heavy drum against my ribs. The first one I picked up was a letter. Thick paper. Formal letterhead. Not from Harvard. It was from our local community college, dated 15 years ago. It was a dismissal letter. Academic probation, followed by failure to maintain grades. Dismissed. Not transferred. Dismissed. My breath hitched. This couldn't be right. A mistake. Maybe he reapplied later? I dug deeper, hands starting to shake. There were bank statements showing accounts overdrawn, notices of default on small loans. Then, a thick packet stapled together. Personal bankruptcy filings. Dated 7 years ago. Discharged. And underneath that, shivering cold despite the stuffy room, an application for unemployment benefits. Filed just 2 months ago. Michael Sullivan, my son. I felt dizzy, the room tilting slightly. This had to be some horrible mistake. Maybe this belonged to someone else. But the name, the address, the social security number, snippets, it was all Michael. My Michael. The final item in the box was a spiral notebook. Not like his school notebooks. This one was newer. I opened it hesitantly. The page wasn't notes on economics or market strategy. It was a script. Detailed notes on how to sound busy and important on the phone. Phrases like, circle back on those derivatives and touch base with the Hong Kong office. And there were website links to sites that rented out temporary office spaces by the hour, spaces that looked suspiciously like the office I saw in our video calls. There were sketches of office layouts, notes on what kind of suit to wear for believable photos. He had even listed names. Fake colleagues to mention casually in conversation. Had lunch with Peterson today. Brilliant guy. Miller's team is handling the acquisition. It was a meticulously crafted lie. a blueprint for the phantom life he had presented to me for 15 years. The Harvard degree, the Wall Street job, the fancy apartment, all of it, smoke and mirrors detailed in cheap spiral notebook. I dropped the notebook as if it had burned me. The air rushed out of my lungs. $68,000. My retirement. Gone. Not invested. Just gone. Fed into this elaborate, suffocating lie. Why? How could he? The pride I had carried for so long curdled into something cold and sharp in my stomach. Disbelief warred with a nauseating certainty. The evidence was right here, in my trembling hands. My first instinct was pure, white-hot anger. I wanted to storm downstairs, grab the phone, call him, and scream, "How could you do this to me? To your father's memory?" But something stopped me. A cold dread, perhaps. If I confronted him now, in this state, what would happen? Would he just spin another lie? Would he disappear completely? The thought of losing him entirely, even the version of him I now knew was a fabrication, was terrifying. No, I needed to think. I needed help. I closed the box, my movements stiff, robotic. I pushed it back into the darkest corner of the closet, hiding the evidence of my shattered world. I walked out of the room, closing the door softly behind me, leaving the ghost of the son I thought I knew behind. Downstairs, I picked up the phone, my hand still shaking, and dialed Ellen Carter. My oldest friend. Sharp as a tack, practical, a retired accountant who missed nothing. If anyone could help me see clearly through this fog of shock and betrayal, it was Ellen. "Ellen," I managed, my voice sounding thin and reedy even to my own ears. "I need your help. Something's terribly wrong with Michael." I knew deep down this was just the beginning. I had pulled back the curtain, just a crack, and I had a sickening feeling that the reality waiting behind it was far worse, far more complicated than even this box of lies suggested. I thought I was ready to face the truth. But the truth I was about to uncover would challenge everything I thought I knew about my son and about myself. Ellen arrived 20 minutes later, her sensible sedan pulling quietly into my driveway. She took one look at my face, ushered me to the kitchen table, and poured me a glass of water before I even managed to stammer out the whole story. Ellen has always been my rock, especially since Tom passed. Practical, level-headed, with a no-nonsense attitude honed by 40 years of balancing books and dealing with audits. She listened patiently, her expression growing progressively tighter as I recounted finding the box, the dismissal letter, the bankruptcy, the chilling notebook. I avoided mentioning the amount of money, not yet. Shame kept the number lodged in my throat. When I finished, she didn't offer platitudes or shocked gasps. She just nodded slowly. "All right, Pat," she said, her voice calm but firm. "First things first. Breathe. Second, we need facts, not just feelings. You said you sent him money for investments?" I nodded numbly, finally whispering the figure. "Almost $68,000, Ellen. Over the years, my entire nest egg." Ellen's lips thinned. "Okay. Do you have records? Check stubs? Bank transfers?" "Yes," I said, relieved to have something concrete to focus on. "I kept everything in my filing cabinet." We spent the next hour hunched over my meticulous records. Ellen spread the statements out on the table, her pen flying as she noted dates, amounts, and the receiving account numbers Michael had provided over the years. "These account numbers he gave you," she murmured after a while, tapping a particular statement. "They aren't typical brokerage account numbers, and they change, often." She pulled out her tablet. "Let's see if we can trace where this money actually went. Do you have online banking, Pat?" I did, though I rarely used it beyond checking balances. Ellen navigated the site with practiced ease, cross-referencing my check images and transfer confirmations with the electronic trails. It didn't take long to see a pattern. The money I sent would land in an account under Michael's name, linger for a day or two, and then large portions, sometimes the entire amount, would be transferred out again. Not to Fidelity or Charles Schwab or any recognizable investment firm. The transfers went to a series of different accounts, some personal checking accounts under names I did not recognize, others to online payment processors known for, well, less than transparent transactions. "This isn't investing, Pat," Ellen said gently, her eyes full of concern. "This looks like moving money around, quickly, maybe paying people off." The word bankruptcy echoed in my mind. Paying off debts? But why the secrecy? Why the elaborate Wall Street charade? "What do I do, Ellen?" My voice trembled. "We need more information," she stated decisively. "This Harvard story, the Wall Street job, the penthouse. If the community college letter is real, then all of that is likely fiction. We need to know where he actually lives and what he actually does." She hesitated. "Pat, have you considered hiring someone, a professional, a private investigator?" The thought felt like a betrayal in itself. Spying on my own son? But looking at the bank statements, at the cold, hard proof that my money had vanished into a digital fog, I knew she was right. The lie was too big, too entrenched. I couldn't unravel it alone. "Yes," I agreed, hating the word as it left my mouth. "Okay, find someone discreet." Ellen made some calls. Within a day, she had vetted and hired a retired police detective named Frank Miller, who ran a small, reputable agency. He was experienced, thorough, and most importantly, understood the need for absolute confidentiality. I provided Frank with Michael's photo, his last known, supposed address in Manhattan, his phone number, and the sparse details I actually knew, his car model, his real date of birth. The waiting was agonizing. Every phone call made my heart leap, expecting it to be Frank with news, or worse, Michael, asking why I was suddenly so quiet. I forced myself to maintain normalcy during our brief check-in calls. "Just busy packing, honey," I'd say, my voice sounding artificially bright. "Lots to sort through here." He seemed preoccupied himself, thankfully keeping the calls short. Frank's first report came a week later. It landed like a lead weight in my stomach. The address Michael had given me for his Manhattan penthouse? It belonged to a corporate office building, mostly empty after hours. There was no record of a Michael Sullivan residing there, or in any luxury apartment building in that vicinity Frank had checked. Using cell tower data and some old-fashioned surveillance, Frank had tracked Michael's actual residence. He lived in a small, walk-up apartment building in Queens, a world away from the glittering towers of Manhattan he described. Frank included photos. The building was pre-war brick, a little worn around the edges, fire escapes zigzagging down the front. Functional, not glamorous. Another photo showed Michael leaving the building one morning. He wasn't wearing a tailored suit. He wore jeans, a simple jacket, and carried a worn backpack, heading towards the subway. He looked ordinary. Not like a high-flying executive at all. Ellen held my hand as I absorbed the information. "Okay," she said softly. "So the address was a lie. That fits with the rest of it. What about his job?" That was the next phase of Frank's investigation. Where did Michael go every day? Frank's surveillance over the next few days painted a confusing picture. Michael didn't commute to Wall Street. Instead, he took the subway downtown, but got off near City Hall. Frank followed him on foot and observed him entering a nondescript building that housed several nonprofit organizations. Frank waited. Michael emerged hours later, stopping to talk kindly to a homeless man sitting near the entrance before heading back to the subway. This happened several days in a row. A nonprofit? I stared at the report, bewildered. What kind of nonprofit? Frank's follow-up confirmed it. Michael volunteered and apparently now worked part-time for low pay at an organization that helped homeless individuals find job training and housing resources. It made no sense. Why lie about Harvard and Wall Street only to work for pennies at a charity? Was this another lie? A cover? Then came the ugliest piece of the puzzle. Frank's report also detailed several trips Michael made in the evenings and on weekends, not to fancy restaurants or exclusive clubs. He went to Atlantic City. And not to the upscale casinos. Frank observed him at the cheaper slot machines, the backroom poker tables. He also found records of significant cash withdrawals from ATMs near the casinos, often shortly after I had sent my monthly investment money. And he discovered online activity linked to offshore gambling websites, debts. Significant ones, Frank suspected, though tracking the exact amounts was difficult. There it was. The bankruptcy wasn't just a past mistake, the frantic movement of money, the desperate need for my monthly checks. It wasn't investment capital. It was gambling money. My retirement savings had been fed into slot machines and poker games. The nonprofit job. Was that just a way to look legitimate? Or was it something else entirely? The image of him talking kindly to the homeless man warred with the image of him hunched over a flickering slot machine, my money disappearing with every pull of the lever. I felt sick. Ellen put her arm around me. Pat, I'm so sorry. Why, Ellen? I whispered, tears finally breaking free. Why the nonprofit? If he needed money that badly for gambling, why waste time working for free or for peanuts? Maybe it's his way of trying to do something good, Ellen suggested hesitantly. To balance out the bad? Or maybe he started volunteering genuinely and only recently got the part-time paid position. Or maybe it's just another layer of the lie, I said bitterly, making himself look noble while he bleeds me dry. The anger was back, cold and hard this time, but beneath it, a deep, aching confusion remained. Who was my son? I needed to understand the why. The box in the closet provided the what. Frank provided the where and part of the how, but the why remained elusive. Why start this cascade of lies in the first place? That's when I remembered the notebook from the box. Not just the scripts for phone calls, but the other details. Random passwords scribbled in the margins, account numbers. Could one of them be for his old computer? The dusty desktop tower still sat in his childhood room, unused for years. I hadn't had the heart to get rid of it. Driven by a desperate need for answers, I went upstairs. The computer whirred to life surprisingly quickly. It asked for a password. I tried the first one from the notebook margin. Invalid. The second. Invalid. My heart sank. Then I tried a third, a combination of his old dog's name and his high school graduation year, Buddy 2006. The screen flickered and the desktop appeared. An old, pixelated photo of him and his father at a baseball game smiled back at me. Tom looked so proud. Michael looked young and burdened. I clicked through old folders, feeling like an intruder in my son's past. Documents, music files, photos. Then I found the email application. It took a few tries, but another password from the notebook, Harvard Dream. Gave me access to an old webmail account he hadn't used in years. And there they were. Emails dating back 15, 16 years. Emails between him and the community college admissions office discussing financial aid struggles. Emails to his father, full of forced optimism about classes he was secretly failing. Then, a string of increasingly desperate emails to a friend, confessing he couldn't keep up. that the pressure from Tom was immense, that he was too ashamed to admit he wasn't cut out for the academic path his father demanded. He wrote about dropping out, about pretending to transfer credits that didn't exist. He mentioned taking a bus to Boston, taking a photo outside the real Harvard gates, and sending it to me and Tom to keep the illusion going. The first big lie, born from fear and shame and the weight of his father's expectations. Then emails detailing his first attempts at covering his tracks, getting a low-wage job but pretending it was an internship, renting a cheap room but describing an imaginary dorm. The lies snowballed, each one requiring another to support it. The Wall Street job came later, perhaps after the bankruptcy, a desperate attempt to project the success he felt he owed his father's memory, and perhaps owed me. Reading those messages, my anger began to morph into something else, a profound sadness. He wasn't just a liar and a gambler. He was a scared kid who made a mistake years ago and had been running from it ever since, digging himself deeper and deeper into a hole of deceit. The pressure Tom put on him, I knew it was immense. Tom loved Michael fiercely, but he had a rigid definition of success, one tied exclusively to academic achievement and financial wealth, a definition Michael clearly couldn't live up to. Had I, in my pride and my grief, unknowingly perpetuated that pressure after Tom died? Had my beaming praise for his fictional success made it impossible for him to ever tell me the truth? The nonprofit job suddenly clicked into place, not as a cover, but perhaps as the one place where Michael felt he could be real. Doing something meaningful, away from the suffocating expectations tied to the Sullivan name. It didn't excuse the lies or the gambling or the theft of my retirement funds, but it complicated the picture. He wasn't a simple villain. He was tragically, devastatingly flawed. My resolve shifted. Confronting him in anger felt wrong now. It wouldn't solve anything. It might just push him further away, deeper into his secret life. I needed a different approach. But what? How do you confront a lie that has defined your relationship for 15 years? How do you salvage anything from the wreckage? Ellen found me sitting in Michael's dusty room, staring at the computer screen, tears silently tracking paths through the dust on my cheeks. I told her what I found. "He was just a kid, Ellen," I whispered, scared and ashamed. "He's not a kid anymore, Pat," she said gently but firmly. "He's a grown man who made terrible choices, choices that have deeply hurt you and jeopardized your future. Understanding why he started doesn't erase what he's done since." She was right. Understanding wasn't forgiveness. And it certainly didn't bring back my money. Ellen suggested something else. "There are support groups, Pat, for families dealing with difficult situations, addiction, deception. Maybe talking to others who've been through something similar could help, give you some perspective. Strategies?" It felt like another admission of failure, but I was desperate. Ellen found a group that met weekly in a church basement in the next town over, parents of adult children in crisis. Walking in that first night, my stomach churned with anxiety and shame. But listening to the other parents share their stories, stories of addiction, mental health struggles, financial ruin, estrangement, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Less alone. These parents understood the tangled knot of love, anger, disappointment, and fear that I carried. They didn't judge, they listened, and they offered quiet, practical wisdom. It was there, in that circle of weary but resilient parents, that I began to formulate a plan. Not one of retribution, but one aimed at truth, accountability, and perhaps, eventually, healing. But just as I started to feel a fragile sense of hope, the phone rang. It was Michael, and his voice had that familiar edge of forced cheerfulness that now sent shivers down my spine. He had a new investment opportunity, he said. A big one this time. He just needed $5,000 to get in on the ground floor. Hearing Michael's voice on the phone, weaving another tale of phantom investments, felt like ice water sluicing through my veins. $5,000. Just like that. After everything I now knew, after the $68,000 already gone, swallowed by his fabricated life and his hidden addiction. The ease with which he asked, the practiced confidence in his tone, it was chilling. For a moment, pure, unadulterated rage surged. How dare he? But the lessons from the support group, Ellen's steadying influence, and the heartbreaking emails I'd read held me back. Exploding wouldn't help. It would only make him defensive, perhaps drive him further underground. I needed to stay calm. I needed to control the situation. Oh, another opportunity, Michael? I kept my voice even, betraying none of the turmoil inside. That sounds interesting. 5,000 is a lot right now, honey, with the house sale and everything. I know, Mom, but this is time sensitive, he pressed, the familiar urgency creeping in. It's a sure thing. We could double it in 6 months. Think about it. That would really help with your moving expenses. He was using my own situation, my own vulnerability against me. The calculation in it stung sharply. Well, I said, stalling, thinking fast. It does sound promising, but, for that amount of money, I'd really like to understand it better. Maybe I could come into the city. We could meet at your office or even your apartment. You could walk me through the prospectus? Silence on the other end. A split second of dead air that felt like an eternity. Then a nervous chuckle. Now's not great, Mom. The office is chaos. We're right in the middle of a merger analysis. And the apartment, well, it's always a bit of a bachelor pad disaster zone. The excuses tumbled out. Practiced, but somehow less convincing than before. Had he sensed a shift in me? Nonsense, I pushed gently, channeling a calm I absolutely did not feel. I don't mind a little mess. I raised you, remember? How about this weekend? I could drive in on Saturday. We could have lunch near your place, then pop up so you can show me the details. I was calling his bluff. I knew there was no penthouse, no prospectus. I wanted to see how far he would take the lie, now that I was pushing back, even slightly. More hesitation. Saturday. Gosh, Mom, I think I have that charity gala thing. Let me check my calendar and get back to you. I really should run. The London market is about to open. And just like that, he was gone, leaving me holding a dead phone and a heart pounding with a mixture of dread and grim satisfaction. He wouldn't call back about Saturday. I knew it. The walls of his fabricated world were starting to close in. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the dismissal letter, the bankruptcy papers, the gambling websites Frank had mentioned, the kind face of the man working at the nonprofit, the scared boy in the emails. Who was the real Michael? Was any part of him left beneath the layers of deceit? The $68,000 felt like a physical weight on my chest. It wasn't just money. It was my security, my peace of mind, the buffer I thought I had against the uncertainties of aging. It was the trust I had placed so completely in my only child. I thought about Tom. Would he be horrified? Disappointed? Angry? Yes, probably all of those things. But maybe, just maybe, he would also feel a pang of guilt for the pressure he'd put on Michael, the pressure that had clearly contributed to this mess. The next few days passed in a blur of packing boxes and quiet anxiety. Michael didn't call back about the fictitious meeting. He sent a brief text saying something unavoidable had come up. I didn't reply. The silence stretched between us, heavy and unnatural. Then, at my next support group meeting, something happened. A woman named Maria, who rarely spoke, shared an update about her son, who had struggled with homelessness and addiction for years. "He got a job," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "A real job, data entry. It's part-time, but it's a start. This volunteer at the outreach center, this young man, he didn't give up on him. He walked him through the application, helped him get clean clothes for the interview. Such a kind young man." She fumbled in her purse and pulled out a crumpled business card. "He gave Joey his card, said to call any time, said his name was Michael." My breath caught. She passed the card around the circle. Plain cardstock. "Michael Sullivan, community support advocate," and the address of the nonprofit Frank had identified. Maria continued, "He told Joey that everyone deserves a second chance, that he understood how hard it was to get back on your feet." Hearing that, seeing the genuine gratitude on Maria's face, solidified something within me. My son, the liar, the gambler who had stolen my retirement savings, was also capable of profound kindness. He was doing something meaningful, something that mattered, even while trapped in his own destructive cycle. He wasn't just conning me. He was living a bizarre double life, torn between the successful image he felt compelled to project and the quiet, low-paying work that seemed to genuinely resonate with some better part of him. But the kindness didn't negate the harm. It didn't excuse the deception. If anything, it made the situation more tragic, more urgent. He needed help. He needed to face the truth, all of it. And I realized, sitting there in that church basement, that I was the only one who could make that happen. Waiting for him to confess was futile. Confronting him in anger would likely backfire. I had to go to him. Not to the phantom penthouse in Manhattan, but to the real apartment in Queens. The decision settled over me, calm and clear. I wouldn't ambush him screaming. I would go prepared. I would lay the truth bare, not as an accusation, but as a reality we both had to finally acknowledge. That Friday, I didn't pack boxes. Instead, I gathered the evidence. I retrieved the cardboard box from the back of Michael's closet. The dismissal letter, the bankruptcy filings, the unemployment application, the chilling notebook detailing the scripts and fake office setups. I printed copies of the bank statements Ellen had highlighted, showing the flow of my money into his accounts and out towards unknown destinations. I added Frank Miller's reports with the photos of the Queens apartment building and the notes on the nonprofit and the casino trips. It felt like assembling the pieces of a shattered mirror. Each document reflected a painful fragment of the truth. I placed everything carefully back into the cardboard box. It was heavy, not just with paper, but with 15 years of lies and misplaced trust. Ellen came over that evening. I told her my plan, to go to Michael's apartment in Queens the next morning unannounced. "Are you sure you're ready for this, Pat?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. "You don't have to do this alone. I can come with you." I shook my head. "Thank you, Ellen, but this is between me and Michael. I need to do this myself." I appreciated her strength, her unwavering support, but this confrontation felt deeply personal. It was the culmination of my journey, from blind pride to devastating discovery to this fragile point of clarity. "What will you say?" she asked. "I don't know exactly," I admitted, "but I'll start with the truth I want to believe in. I'll start with the non-profit." I clutched the wrinkled business card Maria had given me. Maybe, just maybe, acknowledging the one piece of his life that seemed real and good could be the key to unlocking the rest. That night felt like the longest of my life. I sat in Tom's old armchair, the cardboard box resting on the ottoman in front of me. Was I strong enough? Could I face him without breaking down? Could I offer a path forward without excusing the past? The fear was immense. Fear of his reaction. fear of irrevocably damaging our relationship, fear of what the future held now that my financial security was gone. I felt utterly alone, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. This was my dark night of the soul, the moment before the dawn, where all hope seemed distant. But as the first hints of gray light began to streak the sky, a different feeling emerged. Not hope exactly, but determination. I had survived Tom's death. I had survived the initial shock of Michael's betrayal. I would survive this too. For my own sake, and perhaps for his, I had to see this through. I had to trade the comfortable lie for the difficult truth. I picked up the box, its weight feeling both burdensome and grounding. I carried it out to my car, placing it carefully on the passenger seat. I started the engine, the familiar rumble a small comfort in the pre-dawn quiet. I drove out of my familiar neighborhood, leaving behind the house filled with memories and illusions, heading towards Queens, towards an unknown future. I didn't know if this confrontation would lead to healing or a final, heartbreaking break. But as the highway miles disappeared beneath my tires, I knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back now. I had to walk through that door. Finding the address in Queens wasn't difficult, but parking was another story. I finally squeezed my sensible sedan between a battered pickup truck and an overflowing dumpster on a side street blocks away from Michael's building. Walking towards it, clutching my purse with the car keys inside, the cardboard box heavy under my other arm, I felt a strange mix of resolve and nausea. The neighborhood wasn't dangerous, just tired. Working-class families, laundry hanging on lines strung between buildings, the distant rumble of the elevated train. It was a universe away from the sleek, imagined canyons of Wall Street. There it was, the brick building Frank Miller had photographed. No doorman, no gleaming lobby. Just a simple, slightly battered wooden door with a row of buzzers beside it. Sullivan, M, Apartment 3B. My heart hammered against my ribs. I took a deep breath, shifted the weight of the box, and pressed the buzzer. A moment of silence, then a crackle. "Yeah? Who is it?" Michael's voice, muffled and wary. Not the smooth executive tone, but something closer to the boy I remembered. "Michael, it's Mom." Another silence. Longer this time. I could picture him freezing on the other side of the intercom, confusion warring with panic. Finally, the lock buzzed loudly, startling me. I pushed the heavy door open and stepped into a narrow hallway that smelled faintly of dust and cooking cabbage. The stairs were worn, the carpet thin. I climbed slowly, the box seeming to get heavier with each step. Apartment 3B was at the end of the landing. The door opened before I reached it. Michael stood there looking stunned. He wasn't wearing a suit, just jeans and a faded sweatshirt, his hair uncombed. He looked tired, older than his 35 years, and utterly bewildered to see me standing there, on his actual doorstep, holding a large cardboard box. "Mom, what are you doing here? How did you find—" His voice trailed off as his eyes fixed on the box. Recognition flickered in his gaze, followed by a wave of raw fear. He knew what was in the box. He stepped back wordlessly, letting me enter. The apartment was small, cluttered. A mismatched sofa, shelves overflowing with books and papers, a tiny kitchen area off to one side with dishes piled in the sink. No view of skyscrapers, just a window looking out onto the fire escape and the brick wall of the next building. It was the apartment of someone struggling, not someone succeeding. The stark reality of it hit me harder than the documents themselves. I walked past him, my legs feeling unsteady. and placed the cardboard box squarely on the small, cluttered kitchen table. The thud echoed slightly in the quiet room. I turned to face him. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the box, his face pale, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. The anger and shock had burned away, leaving behind a profound, aching sadness. I thought about the script I'd rehearsed, the accusations I'd planned, but looking at him standing there trapped and exposed, I started somewhere else. I reached into my purse and pulled out the crumpled business card Maria had given me. Michael Sullivan, Community Support Advocate. I held it out to him. Maria, from my support group, I said quietly. Her son Joey got a job. Because of you. She said you told him everyone deserves a second chance. Michael looked up, startled, his eyes wide with confusion. He didn't take the card. Why, Michael? I asked, my voice low but steady. Why didn't you tell me about this? About the work you're really doing, the good work. That was the question that broke him. Not the accusations I hadn't yet made, but the acknowledgement of the one sliver of truth he hadn't shared. His composure crumbled. He sank onto one of the rickety kitchen chairs, burying his face in his hands. Sobs racked his body. Deep, painful sounds that seemed torn from his very soul. I waited. I let him cry. The dam had broken, and 15 years of secrets, shame, and fear came pouring out. He confessed everything, the words tumbling over each other in a torrent of misery, the pressure from his father, the crushing weight of expectation he could never live up to. Failing out of community college, not Harvard. The shame that made him construct the first lie, the photo outside the Harvard gates, how one lie led to another, bigger, more complex. The fake jobs, the fake office, the fake life. He confessed the bankruptcy. And then, hesitantly, shamefully, he confessed the gambling. How it started small, a way to cope with the stress of maintaining the facade, a desperate hope of a big win that could somehow make the lies true. How it spiraled out of control, becoming an addiction that consumed him and consumed the money I sent him, money he knew I couldn't afford to lose. I used the nonprofit work to feel like I wasn't completely worthless, he choked out between sobs. It was the only real thing, the only thing I was doing that wasn't a lie. I wanted to tell you about it, Mom. So many times, but how could I? How could I admit that this, he gestured vaguely around the small, cluttered apartment, was my reality after telling you I was living in a penthouse? How could I admit I threw away your money? Then came the small twist I hadn't expected. He reached into a drawer and pulled out a small, battered envelope. Inside was a few $100s in cash. I started trying to save, he stammered, pushing the envelope across the table towards me. From the little bit I earn at the center, I was going to try to start paying you back. Just a little bit. It's not much, I know. It's pathetic. I looked at the money, then back at my son, his face streaked with tears, stripped bare of all pretense. Pathetic? Yes, maybe. But it was also the first honest gesture he had made towards me in 15 years. I didn't pick up the envelope. I sat down opposite him at the table, the box of evidence between us. Michael, I said, my voice gentle but firm, I'm not going to lie to you. Finding out about this, it broke my heart. The money, losing my savings, it's devastating. I don't know how I'll manage. His face crumpled further. But what hurts more, Michael, is that you felt you couldn't tell me the truth. That you thought my love, your father's love, was dependent on you being some Wall Street hotshot. I was so ashamed, he whispered. I know, but the lies have to stop. Now, I leaned forward. This isn't the end of the road, Michael, unless you choose for it to be. But things have to change, completely. I laid out my conditions, not as punishments, but as requirements for any kind of future relationship, any path towards rebuilding trust. First, you get help for the gambling, real help. Therapy, Gamblers Anonymous, whatever it takes. I will support you finding it, but you have to do the work. He nodded, tears still flowing. Second, we see a financial counselor together. We figure out the exact extent of the damage, and we make a realistic plan for you to pay back every single dollar you took from my retirement fund. I don't care how long it takes. It's about accountability. He nodded again, looking overwhelmed but not resistant. Third, and most importantly, I looked him straight in the eye. No more lies, not one. Not about where you live, not about what you do, not about who you are. I want my son back, the real one, flaws and all. Can you do that? Yes, Mom, he whispered, his voice hoarse. I'll do anything. I'm so sorry. So sorry. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. The wounds were too deep for that. But it was a beginning. A fragile truce negotiated in the ruins of his fabricated life. In the weeks that followed, Michael took the first tentative steps. He found a Gamblers Anonymous meeting. We had our first session with a financial counselor, the numbers laid out starkly on the page, a debt that would take him years, possibly decades, to repay on his meager nonprofit salary. It was daunting, but he didn't flinch. I made a difficult phone call to my sister and brother, Tom's siblings. I didn't reveal the full extent of the financial disaster or the gambling. That was Michael's story to tell when he was ready. But I did correct the narrative I had so proudly spun for years. I told them Michael wasn't on Wall Street. I told them he was doing important community work, helping vulnerable people, and that I was incredibly proud of the man he was becoming. It was framing the truth in the most positive light, yes, but it was the truth. It gave him a foundation of honesty to stand on with the rest of the family. I sold the house, the closing bittersweet. I moved into a small, sunny apartment, much smaller than I had originally planned before the $68,000 evaporated. But filling it with my own things, arranging my books on the shelves, felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. I started volunteering at the local library, taking the first small steps towards that old dream of mine. Maybe not a whole community library, but a reading corner, perhaps, a literacy program. It was a start. I still attend the support group. Those parents have become my lifeline, my community. Sharing my story, hearing theirs, reminds me that brokenness doesn't mean the end. Sometimes it's the beginning of finding a different kind of strength. The box of documents? It's stored away now in the back of my own closet. I don't need to look at it anymore. The truth is out, raw and painful, but real. Michael and I talk, really talk, for the first time in years. The trust is rebuilding slowly, tentatively. The financial hole remains, a constant worry. But I find I sleep better now, living in truth, than I ever did basking in the glow of a lie. I realized something profound through all this pain. I mourn the loss of my savings, I truly do. But I don't mourn the loss of the Harvard star or the Wall Street wizard. That son never really existed. I grieve that my actual son felt he had to invent him. As I told my friends in the support group, my deepest sorrow wasn't that Michael didn't achieve the kind of success the world celebrates. It was that he thought that kind of success mattered more than my unconditional love for him, just as he was. Finding our way back to that truth, that's the real investment. And it's a journey we're finally taking together, one honest day at a time. Thank you so much for listening to my story today. It means the world to share it with you all. If you connected with it, Or if you have faced similar challenges in your own family, please give this video a like and consider subscribing to our channel. We love reading your thoughts and experiences, so please share them in the comments below. You are not alone. Be sure to check out our other stories as well. We look forward to seeing you again next time. Goodbye for now.